energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución de gas natural, regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo. En Promigas, desde hace 48 años, conectamos a millones de personas a través de fuentes de energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución de gas natural, regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo. En Promigas, desde hace 48 años, conectamos a millones de personas a través de fuentes de energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución de gas natural, regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo. En Promigas, desde hace 48 años, conectamos a millones de personas a través de fuentes de energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución de gas natural, regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo. Regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo. En Promigas, desde hace 48 años, conectamos a millones de personas a través de fuentes de energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución de gas natural, regasificación de GNL, distribución de energía eléctrica, soluciones energéticas y servicios integrados para la industria, generamos valor mediante una huella social positiva y sostenible. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo.
Good afternoon. We would like to welcome to the presentation of quarterly results of Promigas at March 2023. My name is Juliana Vergara, and I'm in charge of relationship with investors through this platform. We have the Q&A function, so you can send them and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Please take into account that this session is being recorded. Today we have Juan Manuel Rojas, CEO of Promigas, Aquiles Mercado, Financial Administrative Vice President, and the whole team of the company. I would like to give the floor to Juan Manuel, who will be starting the presentation. Thank you, Juliana. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. And we are seeing on the screen, and they do confirm that Promigas and its group of companies is in the path of maximizing the value of its assets. And at the same time, we deepen our social footprint, the social impact we have in the areas in which we work. Along these lines, I would like to start by mentioning that in those businesses that imply the growth of our organization to face capacity compared to the same period 2022 in 1.4%, going from 866 million cubic feet per day to 878. Likewise, in our regasification business, we confirmed that our spec plan is indeed a strategic asset for the country. In the first quarter of this year compared to the same quarter last year, we increased in more than 1,000% the use of the regasification plant. We regasified 254 million cubic feet the first quarter, which confirms that this asset is very relevant in order to have energy reliability in Colombia. As to gas distribution, a very important milestone is that we have completed 6,450,000 users in gas and electric power. So we increased in around 8% the number of users compared to the same quarter 2022, when we had closed with 5,900,000. As to gas sales, we had an important increase there, and during the first quarter, we achieved that, and we went from 144 gigawatts hour during the first quarter to 149 in this quarter. This with respect to our core business. If we think about the portfolio we have of low emissions, we also have significant results when it comes to solar energy. We have increased in 74% the megawatts during the first quarter, or between the first quarter 2022 and the first quarter 2023. And in the cells of energy, we increased in 50%, going from 4.4 gigawatts hour to 6.7 gigawatt hour. So we continue growing in a very positive manner. As to discipline and operational excellence, we had a significant quarter. I would like to highlight the following: an operational continuity index of 100%, which is something not that common in our industry, a reduction of 41% in LPG and EVR, which is the time that a person is in a disability after an accident. So during the first quarter of this year, we were able to reduce in 41% the number of accidents that have resulted in disability. And also, as an important milestone, and you're going to see that in the reports during the first quarter, we were able to abate an important tons of CO2, which shows that we are in the right path. So that's 1,451 tons. As to the social aspect, the most important part is 113,734 new users connected to our gas and electricity. And we have the 247 correspond to the electric power. And this, compared to the same period last year, imply a very important increase. And mainly, if we take into account that of those new users, 21,300 belong to income bracket 1, maybe people that stop cooking with firewood, 41,000 to income bracket 2, and 34,000 to income bracket 3. Along these lines, compared to the same period last year, we have an increase in the number of population connected to the network, to the gas network and the electric power, reaching 1,024 populations, towns, villages connected to our network. So the geographic footprint of the Promigas group in Colombia and Peru has been very significant in that area. We have also reached an increase of 20% in the placement of Brilla if we compare the two quarters between 2023 and 2022. and we reached 290 million in placement, and of that 45% go for income bracket 1, 35% to income bracket 2, and 14% for obviously 2022 with 2023. I also would like to highlight that the first quarter we have completed 80% capex execution as of the first quarter 2023, and we feel very satisfied with that result. And if we move on to the next slide, I would like to start with the transportation business when we confirm that the gas transportation and gas service infrastructure to the oil industry, to large users, is a critical business for the Colombia's and Peru's energy mix, obviously contributing with reliability and safety. As to gas pipeline, 3,289 kilometers, high pressure, 1,153 million cubic feet per day, and a transported value this first quarter of 456 million cubic feet per day, while the gas treatment capacity reached 35 million cubic feet per day, and the gas pipeline maintenance 2,753 kilometers. Today, we have 46% of the total natural gas transported in Colombia, and that is indeed a very important milestone, something we really feel proud of. If we go into the details of Promigas on the northern coast of the country, I want to highlight transported volumes. Even though the volumes of the thermoelectric sector dropped, mainly because of the inclusion of certain other projects that's connected to the interior part of the country, and also more hydro contributions in the first plant of Alcano, and also greater volumes transported in Transoccidentes, that is 7% because of a higher consumption in the Argos plant. Completing the first quarter of this year, Promigas has 2,753 kilometers of gas pipeline length and 952 million cubic feet. That's the transportation capacity. Now, if we go to the actions put in place in the group, then we will see that the thermoelectric volumes of the first quarter, I would like to highlight some actions here. Something important within the actions that we have engaged on, what we are doing to increase the term of our transportation agreements. So our objective is through structured commercial strategies of mutual benefit to increase the term to 6.5 years from 4.4 years, which is what we have now. I would like to highlight the efforts being made at Promigas that with the renewal of the agreements, we hope to increase the term from 7.6 to 7.3 years. So you can see what are we expecting as to thermal, distribution, industrial, and service to producers. Also, I would like to highlight feed per day. This is a strategic asset, not only for Promigas, but for the rest of the country. The volumes in 50 million cubic feet could go in any direction. And we have seen, for example, how Reficar has used 7 million from Cuisiana using the interconnection in Ballena. And this ratifies the need that we have presented to UPME and to CREG, so the rates will be issued promptly to see what can we do in compression in order to take that by directionality from 50 million to 170 million cubic feet per day. So we have been moving forward positively in that front. So we hope to hear from Craig pretty soon before El Niño phenomenon. Along these lines, I would like to also underscore some other efforts that we have been implementing in the organization in order to potentiate our growth in 2023 when it comes to transportation. In addition to bi-directionality, we are entering into new agreements at the level of industry commercializing party, and we also have a hard assumption, the, the volumes correction of the speaker that we are transporting. As to liquefied natural gas, I would like to highlight that during the first quarter of 2023, regasification operations were higher than those during the same period, 2022. But it is still capacity use below the one we have available in the regasification plant. The volumes, as I mentioned up front, of natural gas, liquefied natural gas increased in 104%, and natural gas delivered increased 110%, having 5 days of regasification versus 1 day during the same period last year. Having said this, I think it is very important to talk about the expectation in terms of El Nino phenomenon, what could happen according to the last forecast, most likely by the end of the year, according to recent forecast of May 30. We are anticipating el fenómeno del Niño as of the third quarter of the year, but it is still uncertain the intensity and the duration of that El Nino phenomenon. It is also important to highlight that compared to the El Nino phenomenons of the past, this time the dams will be higher, around 20% above the historical level of the past 20 years. Most likely regasification requirement of SPEC will have an increase in the third quarter of this year and mainly the first quarter of 2024. We have to mention that SPEC, as well as its customers, are preparing to guarantee a gas supply and an electric power supply that will be needed by the country under these specific circumstances. As to distribution of gas, I would like to mention that during the first quarter of 2023, we connected, as I mentioned up front, 113,734 new customers, and 33% in Colombia and 67% in Peru, offering well-being and quality of life to 410,000 people. Many of them were cooking with firewood in the past. Our users were served by our companies an execution of 125% versus the budget, having an impact and benefiting a total of 6,450,000 users located in 1,024 places budget compared to the last or to the same period last year. As to mobility, I would like to highlight that we closed the first quarter 2023 with 33 new units of vehicles dedicated to natural gas, and also we had done so in the Surtigas area. So we continue working in this front in order to increase consumption in our dealers, and the mobility factor is one of our priorities. As I mentioned up front, we feel very proud of the reduction that we attained of 41% in the accident rate. That's a significant figure and of very high impact. And we also want to mention that the losses in our system during the first quarter correspond to the low that we had in our transportation service during the first quarter. As to low emission businesses, I would like to mention that the contracted capacity that includes financial and contractual closures reach 59.7 megawatts of contracted capacity, and as to operation and maintenance, 42 megawatts for a total sales of electricity, 13.3 gigawatts hour, 3.4 kilotons of CO2 emissions avoided because of the photovoltaic solar systems, and 2,300,000 cubic meter of gas used in cogeneration. These are the main indicators that we manage when it comes to low emission businesses. Of the contracted capacity, 44.4% corresponds to photovoltaic solar energy, As to the sale of energy, 50%, 6.7 gigawatts hour correspond to solar photovoltaic, while the other 50%, 6.6, correspond to cogeneration. So once this is contracted, we will have that the contracted capacity will avoid the emissions of 33,800 CO2 equivalent per year. And we see a very important growth potential here. If we take a look at decarbonization, we are doing very well. If we see our decarbonization roadmap in December, Promigas announced that we were going to reduce by 50% by 2028 and by 100% by 2040 the intensity of our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and a dedicated part of scope 3 in relation to the 2021 baseline. Having said this, the goal for 2023 corresponds to a reduction of 10,584 tons of equivalent CO2, and we have completed during the first quarter of the year 1,451 tons. It is worth mentioning that 54% of decarbonization initiatives started in 2023. 12 of the 22 initiatives affiliates, we are using 99,632 million pesos for research and development, and of these 25,000 correspond to investment in development of products and services that are totally new. This accounts for 1.6% of the revenues. I mean, it's very important, 1.6% of the revenues of 2022, and moreover, in 2022, the time estimated for innovation projects correspond to 180 people time, I mean, full time dedicated to this. As to our social footprint, I would like to highlight what we have been doing with Brilla, which is something that I mentioned up front. We had 781,000 users with Brilla accounts receivable, and we have 1.1 million loans granted since the start of the program. Today, we have the Brilla accounts receivable is 1,079,000,000 pesos, a variation of 26% with respect to the same period last year. And accounts receivable of more than 90 days corresponds to 3.6%. During the first quarter, as I mentioned, we placed 290 billion pesos to Brilla loans, a variation of 20% correspond compared to the same period last year. We have that 45% of these credits are for people of income bracket 1, and this is the group's net consolidated profit. So Brilla is a very important business and with growth, huge growth possibilities. As to new users, as I mentioned, 3 new populations have been connected compared to the same period last year. 8 populations in Peru and 23 in Colombia, and most of those new users correspond to income brackets 1, 2, and 3 in Colombia, and many Colombians, mainly in some specific territories. For the quarter, I would like to highlight the Pacifico Joven project together with Gases de Occidente, with 90 selected ventures to benefit 180 young people. Also a forum that's called Mujeres Palante, a window into gender equity in the country with the participation of Surtigas leaders in gender issues and 60 teenage mothers, and a high performance in the 2022 Organizational Capacity Index of Asociación de Fundaciones Empresariales. Fundación Promigas obtained a score of 0.81 versus a 0.72 obtained by other business foundations. So this is a very favorable indicator. Okay, I stop here. Now I would like to give the floor to Aquiles Mercado, who's going to talk about the financial results of the first quarter 2023. Good afternoon. Thank you, Juan Manuel. Special greetings to all those that are attending or watching this report. First, we're going to talk about the individual profit and loss statement. As it was mentioned by our CEO, the first quarter we had a reduction in the transported volume, mainly electricity, that went from it came to 114 million cubic feet per day. So we have complied in 90% what we were estimating, and this gave rise to a decrease of 20% in revenues of this quarter compared to the same. However, when we take a look at the EBITDA on the graph, we see that we have executed 105% of the budget, a drop of 24% also expected in the budget because of NIF 15 and other topics that I will mention shortly. So we are going to reach 246 billion pesos versus what was obtained in the previous year. As to revenues, we see that we had 234 billion pesos, and that reduction is that in March 2022 there was an extraordinary revenues because of an indemnity received from Reficar, which was of over 30 billion Colombian pesos, and this corresponds to the termination by this important refinery of the gas transportation agreement, which was replaced by other with flexibilities that benefit Promigas as well as Reficara, and also with a longer term. Given that the present value of the agreement is the same, always looking for the flexibility of our customers. In September 2022, we started the application of the new tariff methodology. On one hand, it implied the regulation of the watt to 10.90 after taxes. So in December 2022, the TEPSA transportation agreement was terminated, and it left a volume that migrated to other branches to the regasification terminal. In November 2022, another agreement was terminated that had to do with expansion of capacities. This was part of the budget in order to better reflect the behavior of revenues with what happened with El Niño phenomenon. As to EBITDA, there is a reduction because of less transportation revenues, higher costs and expenses due to labor expenses that mainly have to do to the wage increase with a CPI above what we have seen in any year, plus 1.6%, and the increase in the legal minimum wage. Change of the organizational structure aligned with the methodology of the company in order to strengthen the business, and also and expecting the new unit to deploy this, and the renewal of insurances because of adjustment in insured assets after the reviews of all the company's assets. Low income versus the participation method. That's something that we previously mentioned, mainly in Gases del Norte, Peru, and Gases del Pacífico, as a result of the application of the accounting standard NIF 15, which has to do with the agreements of customers, long-term concessions, and also the lower levels of investment compared to the last year because of the investment plan for the massification of the natural gas service. The net profit decreased 33%, insisting on the fact that we had considered this for the budget, and we are 104 about this, better than what expected. And there you have the financial expenses related to the debt, 246,553. The best average rate, 14.11, or the highest one versus 7.2, as well as inflation adjustment that we have indexed in UVR that led to higher financial expenses. And there is a financing strategy by means of which in November and December last year we contracted 2 trillion Colombian pesos to have sufficient reserves to comply with the debt and to capex investment. So we are offsetting this because of this surplus, taking, I mean, with the best market conditions. The adjustment of the financial asset at December 2022 and the adjustment of the monthly value for 2023, and at last for the end of 2022 as part of the corporate financing strategy, we mentioned that we wanted to counteract an increase of rates in 2023, so we contracted the anticipated credits that we've mentioned. The result is an increase in cash balance and something important, temporary investments, given that this is in the company's cash and the loans given to affiliated companies and the adjustment because of the monetary correction. As to the balance sheet, we have an increase in assets for the amount of 11.3 billion Colombian pesos, mainly in current asset, given the dividends of linked companies according to the accounting principles related to this registry in the General Assembly meeting of 2023. So, this has been counteracted by the payment of dividends, payment to providers, and the payment of the debt. So you see there the increase of 3%, taking into account the macroeconomic variables to calculate the financial asset, and that corresponds to the current account of the Colombian state regarding these assets under concession, which is usually in our type of activities. Reduction in long-term assets given the dividends of March and the adjustment in coverage conversion in foreign investment. As to liabilities of the transfer, we just mentioned the debt with Bank Scotiabank and Bancolombia and the difference in exchange rate that affects the debt. So now we're going to start the Q&A session. We have two questions related to El Niño phenomenon of Roberto Paniagua of Casa de Bolsa. How do you expect the increase in your gas volumes with a future El Niño phenomenon? What is your expectation regarding the use of spec with a potential El Niño phenomenon? Thank you very much, Roberto, for this question. I am going to mention, or I mentioned in the opening, the aspects related to El Niño phenomenon. Here, I will highlight that according to recent forecasts on the warming of the oceans, it increased above 87% the probability that we are going to have El Niño phenomenon by the end of 2023 and during the next year. What we do not know is the duration of this El Niño phenomenon and its intensity. Having said this, I would like to repeat what I already said. With this El Niño phenomenon, unlike the one of 2050, the dams are 20% above the historical average. In 2015, they were 17% below, so its impact was very severe. Now it's 20% above. What does this mean? In the third quarter, we have to start intensively using our regasification plant, and we're going to see this phenomenon most likely during the fourth quarter, but mainly in the first quarter 2024. So I'm sure that there we'll have an intensive use of our regasification plant until 2031. It is worth highlighting that we have moved on in a significant rate agreement with Grupo Térmico, the use of the plant for 5 additional years until 2031. That's very good for the country and for the Promigas group. The next question from Ricardo Rios, independent analyst, and it has to do also with El Niño phenomenon. What's the impact at the financial level could result as a consequence of El Niño phenomenon? What's the financial impact? According to what we have previously mentioned, the impact of El Niño phenomenon were included in the budget. We have discounted part of this. However, we've had a displacement of this phenomenon in time, which we hope to offset from June on, and also with the intensity. We consider that we were going to have El Niño phenomenon based on the expectations and the models of our commercial group. However, there's a displacement in time that 780 billion pesos, and as it was previously mentioned, the financing strategy implied to invest the resources in the closing of last year in order to minimize the debt contracted last year, but in order to guarantee the company's liquidity so it can honor its obligation, financial obligations, as those that are part of the investment budget. We have a question for our operations VP. What is being done to improve safety in our plants? Thank you for this question. This increase in have been doing for more than 18 months with them. In addition to this, we can reinforce programs such as the executive walks in all the companies and all the contractors of the company. That is, that all the plants and works are being visited to see how the works are being carried out on site. And we also have industrial safety indicators and also in processes, and we are taking them to all the decision levels of the company, and this gives a lot of visibility to industrial safety and processes safety in the company. We also have committees, operational committees in all the companies of the corporation, and we give guidelines and we share lessons learned with all the different teams. Thank you. The next question is from Ricardo Rios, independent analyst. What's the impact, or what is the impact anticipated in case no more exploration contracts are approved in Colombia, and what's the likelihood of that? Thank you, Ricardo, for this question. We consider natural gas as an asset that satisfies basic needs in Colombia. Very recently, we saw what happened in the country, in the southwestern part of the country, because of an operational contingency. 7 million people were left without natural gas between 1 and 3 days. So, in that sense, that specific circumstance, and also the last reserve report increased the concern of what it will mean not to have natural gas available. As an organization, we are indeed prepared to face that. And that is our responsibility with the country moving forward in a positive manner when it comes to the development of its offshore discoveries. We know that the companies are working on these developments, and we should see them as of 2027 already in place, already operating. In the reserve study, even though they went from 8 to 7.2 years proven reserves, we have seen the increase that we've had in contingent resources. These are the ones coming from discoveries of Uchuma and KGG on the Colombian Caribbean, and we have positive expectations that the country could develop them, or could have that gas available, not only imported gas sources. If they are developed, or if gas is imported, the infrastructure of Promigas will be used, because we have them ready for that, mainly because of the new rates in Surtigas. Thank you, Florencia. Not only in Surtigas, but in GDO. The rates for distribution have been approved, those of GDO in September, those of Surtigas in February this year. The GDO last year, for the case of GDO, the company started applying the new rates since October 2022 that estimate higher revenues for GDO of around 35 billion Colombian pesos compared to transitory rates approved. If we consider the rates applied gradually, we will be talking of 11,300,000 pesos. As to Surtigas, in March 2023, we started applying the new distribution rate. Those represents higher revenues of 12.7 billion Colombian pesos with respect to the rate applied in 2022. We have a question for our CFO of Florencia Mayorga of MetLife, which is the leverage expectation for 2023, and how is the financing plan for what's left of the year? Thank you, Florencia, for your question. Based on the budget, we have estimated by the end of 2023 an EBITDA ratio of 3.5. The action margin and the ceiling given by Fitch is 4.5 times, so we are very far from reaching that ceiling. We always maintain the debt-related topic control, so we are not expecting any surprise unless we have new projects, and we are always seeing its contribution to EBITDA to avoid moving away from these limits and to look after this important asset that we've had for many years, which is our local and international ratings. As to the debt related topic in general terms, what we have considered this year was contracted last year, the necessary debt to comply with the obligations of 2023, 2024, thinking about the situation being experienced by the market, which looks better now when we have been able to finance these debts with less expensive debts. And as we mentioned before, we have an important cash positions and an investment to be made in order to honor the due dates and the capex of Promigas and its affiliates. Thank you. We have time for two more questions. What's not answered now will be answered in writing. The question from Juan Gonzalez of Protección says, what are the perspectives that Promigas has as to financial expenses and percentage of our operational income by the end of 2023? Thank you for this question. We are expecting to have around 13% of financial expenses over income consolidated. Actually, the indicator we really look after are those that stipulate Fitch and Moody in the annual reviews to maintain the AAA local and the AAA minus at the international level. And in the case of Moody's, 4.5 of EBITDA and 12% of flow of the funds from operations over the debt. And whenever we are preparing a budget or evaluating an investment plan, we ensure that we comply with both indicators. As we previously mentioned, we have this monitored, and we're not expecting any mismatch regarding the figures with respect to what's set forth by rating agencies. And the last question is also for our CFO, Florencia Mayorga of MetLife. With respect to dividends, why was there only one payment in the first quarter? Florencia, what happens is that the first payment is the last installment of the dividends of 2022 that were decreed in the Assembly of March of that year. So that's a payment that was scheduled since last year. In March 2023, we decreed installments for this year, which we will start paying in June, the first installment. So we repeat the question, is the last payments of the dividends of 2022, that is what's in our financial statement at March 2023. Well, thank you very much for participating in this meeting to present the results of the first quarter. I would like to emphasize what I mentioned up front. we are in a very positive path to maximize the value of our assets and to deepen our social footprint. That's part of the results of the first quarter 2023. If we compare them to the same quarter last year, where we see a growth in our core business of transportation and distribution of gas, as well as of electric power, we see an important growth in our portfolio of low emissions when it comes to distributed solar energy. And at the same time, through this new service and also through the Brilla service, contributing with access to
combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, En Promigas, desde hace 48 años, conectamos a millones de personas a través de fuentes de energía y servicios confiables. En Colombia y Perú, con nuestras 23 compañías dedicadas al transporte y distribución. En 2022, logramos disminuir la pobreza energética para 245.000 nuevos usuarios residenciales que dejaron de cocinar con leña y otros combustibles contaminantes. Gracias a esa masificación, hemos logrado que en Colombia las familias puedan ahorrar 52.000 pesos por mes, ratificando al gas natural como energético, económico, seguro y amigable con el medio ambiente. En Promigas, creemos en la innovación como el puente que conecta nuestro negocio actual con un futuro próspero. En la sostenibilidad como el ADN que nos mueve a transformar las vidas de las comunidades, mejorando sus condiciones de vida a través de iniciativas como Brilla, nuestro modelo de financiación no bancaria, con el que hemos brindado acceso y oportunidades a nuestros usuarios de distribución. Creemos en la diversidad, la equidad de oportunidades y en un ambiente seguro e incluyente para nuestro talento Promigas. En Colombia y Perú, seguiremos trabajando por la sostenibilidad ambiental, la seguridad y la equidad energética, llevando siempre energía que impulsa desarrollo.